And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Bud Elliott. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson. The Big 12 is our next topic of conversation on the win total. So that means we will be going through from the top of the odds list to the bottom of the odds list, all the Big 12 schools. We're talking Iowa State, Oklahoma State, TCU, West Virginia, Baylor, Kansas State, Texas Tech, Kansas, and no other teams. 8 teams in total, right?
Yep. As far as I know,
as far as I've heard, those are the only teams. Yeah, the Iowa State at 9.5. I guess the Big 12 doesn't have a college football playoff contender. Well, it's too bad. All right, okay. Jokes. We'll begin first with Oklahoma and Texas. Jokes. But are y'all ready to count them up?
Let's do it.
As much as I think it's the under is a safe play, like I can't even
count them up. Count them up. How many games y'all gonna win this fall?
I can't fathom 8 wins.
How many games y'all gonna win this fall?
I just can't. I don't see it. It's not on there. It's not the schedule I'm looking at. Unless there's another schedule somewhere.
And we begin with the Oklahoma Sooners in what I will recklessly or boldly declare as the most anticipated year of the Lincoln Riley era. I think that while we were, very excited about Lincoln Riley taking over and what we had seen from the quarterback position, this idea has been put in our head that Spencer Rattler, representing the first one, recruited by Lincoln, picked by Lincoln, developed by Lincoln, combine that with year 3 of Alex Grinch. And now the narrative, which has been sort of bubbling through the summer, now it's time to see if we think that it's going to play out on the field. The non-con for the Sooners, manageable. Tulane on the road. Shout out to Oklahoma for traveling all the way down to New Orleans on the first week of the year. Western Carolina Catamounts, then that Nebraska game, lots of fun around that if you remember. The home draw, and remember, all Big 12 teams play 9 conference games, so everybody sees everybody. Home draw, West Virginia, TCU, Texas Tech, Iowa State. Road draw, Kansas State, Kansas, Baylor, Oklahoma State. Of course, Texas is a neutral. Over-under at Caesar Sportsbook is at 11, minus 110 to either side. What are we doing with the front-running Sooners?
I'm going over. I suspect I'm going to get my money back on this. I think 11 is by far the most likely number here, but I do have 12 as more likely than 10. I like that they get the other top teams in the conference, in my opinion, you can kind of guess at home. I think their road games are pretty manageable. The way they recruit plus the returning talent is not a normal combination we see in college football. Usually teams that recruit this well don't return that much returning experience because those guys are off to the NFL. They had some injuries last year. I think slowed them down early. Spencer Rattler got through some growing pains. If for some reason he falters again, they do have Caleb Williams, who's very, very talented. And I think they're just going to run this thing.
As I was going through my numbers here, I'm with you. I'm on the over because I don't see him losing twice. I could see him losing once. So I feel like I'm pushing it worst. And it's strange to pick an over on a total this high, but it's where I'm going. But there was a part of me that was like, well, maybe we should consider like how the Big 12 kind of treated Missouri and Texas A&M after they announced that they'd been leaving. Like, a lot of the close calls that season tended to go the other way. But then I was thinking, well, Missouri and Texas A&M weren't playoff contenders. And I don't see the Big 12 trying to screw Oklahoma over when Oklahoma is its best playoff chance and getting that, getting the money from that. So, yeah, over 12. I think they're probably going 12-0.
Yeah, I've got push insurance written on my notes right here. I don't see the non-con should be easy wins. And then as I'm like even looking at Iowa State, I still think that Oklahoma might be 2 touchdowns better than Iowa State with that game playing at home. I think Oklahoma is going to be way ahead of Texas. It would take even for some of the dangerous teams that are in the Big 12, like you mentioned, the home road split's pretty good. So ditto, I'm on the over 11.
This team lost 2 games last year.
I know.
Right? Everybody's aware of it.
They always lose 1 regular season game. They're good for 1 regular season loss, but 2, I don't know.
I'm on the over 2. I was just trying to make a little bit of drama here. So I have concerns about Spencer Rattler, not as a player, but leadership, intangibles, especially with name, image, and likeness, and potentially that creating some issues. But I don't think it matters. You cannot like him, but this system has been proven. And if anything happens to him, or if he struggles again, like he did last year, Lincoln Riley's not afraid to make a change.
And he's got a better quarterback behind him.
Which you may have a really good point about that. But I do still think what I look for, uber talented teams that are going to be invested for 12 games the whole way throughout. Not teams that are a little bit had told how great they're going to be this offseason. I know Oklahoma's receiving some love, but think about this. There are going to be a lot of darling Iowa State picks to make the playoff, to win the Big 12. This is their year. Matt Campbell's on the rise. What do we tell Oklahoma about their bowl game last year? You might have beat Florida, but no one was there. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like, I think this team, if I was them and I was Lincoln Riley, I think they're irritated. I think they're mad. I think they're focused. And what else have they been told? Oh, you guys can't win a playoff game. Can't win a playoff game. Like, I think this team has all the incentive in the world to run the table, and I think they do. And the schedule is the non-conference is guaranteed 3 wins. I know Nebraska fans won't like to hear that, but they're just not in the same stratosphere. And catching Iowa State, their closest competitor at home, I think is lock it up. Give me over.
Texas is the only loss there, right? And that would be just sort of the mystique of the rivalry and, everything else going into it. Because if you're going to go to Kansas State, I don't think I think it would be shocking for Oklahoma to lose to Kansas State 2 years in a row.
See, I think they can lose to Texas or Iowa State. I just don't see them losing both.
Correct.
Right.
How many games are going to win this fall?
Which brings us to those Iowa State Cyclones. Over under win total at Caesars is at 9.5. The non-con, you've got Northern Iowa, and then at UNLV. The home draw in conference play, 4 home games: Kansas, Oklahoma State, Texas, and TCU. And then on the road, they've got to go to Baylor, Kansas State, West Virginia, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma. The returning production, the returning experience. Matt Campbell is back with a group that is very much the everything that he could have imagined and everything he could have sold 3 years ago, trying to get Iowa State fans to believe in this 5-star culture. Like, this is it. Like, you are being put to the test, and whether or not your method can compete for championships and whether you can win at the highest level. So over under at 9.5, an Iowa State team that we've had a very intimate relationship with. Shout out to all you Cyclones fans riding with us all through the summer. Which way are we going?
I'll start. I'm going under. And I'm going to get called an Iowa State hater because I'm predicting Iowa State's going to go 9-3. So think about that for a minute.
Best season they've ever had.
Yeah, and we're going to be labeled as Iowa State haters. So it's going to be a good Iowa State team. It might be the second best team in the conference. I don't think they're at the same level of Oklahoma, even though they beat Oklahoma last year. And you look at the schedule, like Iowa, always a tricky game for Iowa State. It's a rivalry. It's a fun game. It's going to be tough. It's even if Iowa State is better or Iowa is better, that game is always a coin flip. You look at the road schedule in the Big 12. Oklahoma on the road, that's tough. But even if you look at the rest of that road schedule, trips to Baylor, Kansas State, and West Virginia are tricky games for anybody. So I think there's potential for a loss there. I think that they could beat Texas at home, but I don't think it's a gimme. I think they could beat Oklahoma State at home, but I don't think that's a gimme. So when I go through this schedule, I see plenty of potential losses and I see plenty of potential wins. So every time I do the math, 9-3 is a lot more likely than 10-2.
Over.
Whoa, look at this guy. What a moron.
You mentioned those Texas and Oklahoma State games.
Mm-hmm.
I think both of them being at home probably helps Iowa State. And when we think about the Baylor and West Virginia trips, I'm less worried about an experienced team being shook by an intimidating road environment. And I understand we're talking about best season ever, and that's what I'm predicting, but I'm going to give you the Oklahoma loss, but then as I'm trying to break the tie on some of these last decisions, I need one of Texas and Oklahoma State plus Iowa. I'm giving them the win against Iowa. I think they're the better team. I think they're the more complete team. And so even if I'm wrong about the Iowa game, I think I'm still in it for 10-2. It's just harder to think that you're going to beat both Texas and Oklahoma State and not slip up anywhere else along the way. But the real pivot point for me, and it's going to come back because I got to stay true to my word when we go to the Big Ten win totals. But the real pivot point for me is that I think Iowa State beats Iowa in that game. And I think that plus one of Texas and Oklahoma ends up getting me to 10-2. So plus with a little value, plus 100 to the over, minus 120 to the under. I'll take the over with the Cyclones.
But there, don't you have any kind of principle that says anytime the over would be the team's best season in history, I probably shouldn't take it?
I think that Matt Campbell might be one of the best coaches in Iowa State football history. And I think we're already starting to see like more AP top 25 appearances in the Matt Campbell era than daggum the last 10, 20 years. So to think that we are in unprecedented territory for Iowa State football, I don't think that is a reason to sway me from betting on it, because I'm still putting a ceiling on this team.
Does anybody know who the winningest coach in Iowa State history is?
Is it Jack Trice?
As far as
Matt
most wins? No. Oh. It is Dan McCarney, who went
he has a sub 500 record.
Who went 56 and 85.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm on the over.
I'm on the under. I think 10-2 is slightly more likely than 8-4 for this team personally, which is why sometimes I tell you guys, hey, there's better odds elsewhere than Will Hill. Personally, if I was going to take this over, there are several shops that are dealing 9 flat at minus $1.30. That push protection is very key if you want to go over, in my opinion, because 9 really stands out as one of the outcomes in my numbers where they're over 30% likelihood, right? So that's pretty key to have on your side. I would definitely not bet this over the 9.5. Sorry, Chip, we have a disagreement there, and you may kick my ass on this. We'll see. I have obviously Iowa and Oklahoma are not games in which they're going to be favored by more than a touchdown, but honestly, I think they're single digits at best at Texas Tech, at Kansas State, at Baylor, hosting TCU, hosting Oklahoma State, at West Virginia, and hosting Texas. I mean, that if you give them the Oklahoma loss, I just need them not to go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I just need them not to go 6-2 or better against that stretch, right? I think 5-3 is pretty likely there in those 8 games. I only have I think I have 3 locks for them. The rest are all potentially losable. They won't lose all of them, but they could, in theory, lose a game or 2 in that stretch.
I'm going to take the under as well.
Yes.
Man, we just hating on the Cyclones.
Yes.
I agree with all you guys. I was looking at potential losses. I had Oklahoma, Texas, West Virginia, TCU. I did not have Texas Tech on there, but I think Bud brings up an interesting point about the spreads in those games are going to be closer than you think. I think in order for Iowa State to be 10-2 or better, and be this darling team, and this goes back to Bud's formula with the blue chip ratio. If you don't have the blue chip ratio, the amount of 4 and 5 star to compete and be dominant like Oklahoma does, like Clemson does, like Ohio State has, what were the outliers? They had difference makers at quarterback, like somebody who was Deshaun Watson. Wasn't he one of the outliers, Bud? I think his year with Clemson, they were at 50% or lower, like 49.
The year where they narrowly lost to Alabama the first time, they were at like 48.8, I think. And the year they won it, they finally snuck over it with Watson.
And the team
Mariota came really close against Ohio State.
Yep. Like those are difference making quarterbacks. And I think with a team that you're expecting 10 wins from, as great as Breece Hall might be, but they had him last year and he was running all everybody and it was pretty pedestrian. I think he's a good quarterback. I just don't know if he's the type that can elevate them to a level where they don't lose more than 2 games. So I'm going to take the under as well. I also think it's interesting because they've had the 5-star mentality, 3-star player, and that chip on their shoulder. It is different when people are starting to talk you up, and now all of a sudden you're not that underdog who nobody's giving any credit for. They're going to be a trendy pick. They're going to be a trendy pick week to week. They're going to be the favorite. So how long do you sell that message to your team? And I just think the more likely scenario is a 9-3 season.
So week to week, I might be on the other side. I agree with you there. There's going to be like some people are going to see some spreads and they're going to say like, oh, what the team that's number 6 in the country? No way. But again, when we're talking about the win total, I'll fall back on the experience. I mean, they were 1-4 against the spread at home last year. Like they get the big win, the splashy win. Everyone starts jumping on them. Their value is greatly inflated. So I'm with you on the week to week, but come on, clones, we can go 10-2.
The other thing I would point out here is that Iowa State is a supremely experienced team, which is great, right? Like you'd rather be experienced than inexperienced. But I have a theory for this year that great experience is probably going to be more helpful early in the season rather than late, because obviously the later you go in the season, the more experienced all teams are getting because everybody's getting reps. That's sort of not speaking of the depth, obviously. The depth is a bit of a different question. But Iowa State is going to be undefeated or one loss most likely through the first week of October, right? They open Northern Iowa, at UNLV, at Baylor, host Kansas. After that, they have some really difficult spots. They have to go to Manhattan, Kansas, which is not an automatic dub. They host Oklahoma State. Then they're at West Virginia. Then they host Texas. Then they have an incredible sandwich spot where they have to go travel to Lubbock in between the Texas and at Oklahoma games. And then on short rest, they have to come back home and play TCU, a team that I think is actually going to play for the Big 12 title. So, like that is a really difficult final 7 games there with, when is their bye? Before Kansas State. So they don't get a bye during that stretch. Like they got to play those 7 games in a row.
And Chip, going back to your week to week point, just a little note for our listeners here, just to keep in mind as we get to the season. Matt Campbell at Iowa State as an underdog is 20-11 against the spread. As a favorite, he's only 16-15-1.
Ooh,
you know
and
why
that
is?
A lot of favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they play very slowly, and they don't have enough possessions oftentimes to blow people out. So it's kind of the Jimbo thing, right? Sometimes he does the best against the spread when he's a little bit outgunned.
Count them up.
The Texas Longhorns, all gas, no brakes. Steve Sarkisian taking over. Our over under win total at the Caesar Sportsbook is at 8. And it's actually juiced a little bit to the under, plus 110 to the over, minus 130 to the under. There's some difficult non-cons here. We've got Louisiana and Arkansas, and then they've also got Rice. The home draw is going to be Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, Kansas, and Kansas State. Pretty favorable. Then on the road, TCU, Baylor, Iowa State, and West Virginia. And of course, we point out the neutral against the Oklahoma Sooners. So which way is it going to be 7-5 or 9-3? Which one is more likely when we look at year one for Steve Sarkisian? Which one do you think you're going to be picking right here?
Why'd you skip 8-4?
Because it's the push. And when you have to make your decision,
I'm looking at 7.5. Sorry.
Ooh.
Yeah, I had 7.5
on Will Hill
book. No, I should have clarified that.
Okay.
Actually,
because
you actually have a 7.5.
Yeah.
Can you text me real fast?
Yeah, sure.
I'm very interested in 7.5. That is.
So it's the Caesars Sportsbook officially. We had a big relaunch rebrand over at Billy Hill this week. But the numbers that we are using are the Caesar Sportsbook by William Hill, and the Caesars number that I pulled this morning was at 8, juiced a little bit to the under. So
would you say that the Caesars Sportsbook crossed the Rubicon and now there's no more William Hill?
Jokes.
Have we updated the branding on that officially yet?
I got a style note about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So which way are we going?
Well, I think I know which way Danny and Bud are going.
They're looking for that over.
They're looking for the 7.5. So.
Because 8-4 sounds like a good answer.
Yeah. No,
there's not a 3-0 non-con performance. That would be the biggest stunner for me. If you go Louisiana, Arkansas, and Rice. And
see, I think 3-0 is very much in play there. I'm going over.
Okay.
I do think 9-3 is more likely than 7-5 because I think the thing about that Louisiana game is we all know how good that team is, and we all know that they've got everybody coming back. But Texas knows that too. So I feel like in a situation last year where Louisiana went and beat Iowa State, it was kind of first of all, I can't remember what the win expectancy was on that game, but I'm pretty sure Iowa State was expected to win that game most of the time. Like the Cajuns had a couple of special teams touchdowns and some stuff that kind of flipped it, but they also kind of caught you off guard because you didn't realize how good that team was. Texas knows how good this team is. Steve Sarkisian knows this is going to be my first game as coach of this team. He's going to want his team ready. He's going to want to win the game. I think Texas is probably going to win that game, although Louisiana is very much capable of knocking them off. I don't think Arkansas on the road is going to be too big of a deal for them, because Arkansas, I think last year was much better than we anticipated, but I still don't think it's quite at Texas level yet. And then Rice is Rice. That should be a win. So I see them going 3-0 in non-con. So now the question becomes is, can they go 6-3 in conference? Yeah. I mean, I think they're probably going to lose that Oklahoma game. I think that Iowa State game on the road is tough, but they do get Oklahoma State at home. They get Kansas and Kansas State at home. Those are wins. The West Virginia Baylor kind of on the road is tricky, but I think that they probably win that Baylor game. West Virginia is more tricky. TCU on the road, somewhat tricky, but it's also early in the season. And I feel like that's kind of working to Texas's benefit too, is where I feel like their schedule's kind of front loaded, because they get Louisiana, TCU, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State all within their first 7 games before their bye. And then the last 5 has that road trip to Iowa State, but it's also Baylor, Kansas, West Virginia, and Kansas State, which isn't a murderer's row as far as, the typical Big 12 schedule that everybody plays. So I think 8-4 is most likely. I think 9-3 is more likely than 7-5.
I'm going under. I'm having a hard time feeling really good about 9-3 coming in here for a team and a locker room that a program that has only gone over 7 regular season wins once under Tom Herman. So, we talk about the unprecedented stuff. I understand I'm talking on the other side of the exact same point, but if I was just to go to the roster that's here, I think it is within a field goal of Oklahoma State. I think it's probably within a touchdown of TCU, and that's ahead. And I think it's slightly behind an Iowa State and markedly behind an Oklahoma. So with the probably 1 loss coming in non-con, now all of a sudden I'm moving on to that 6-3 note that you were pointing to. Oklahoma is a game that I could see them winning, but for the purposes of this, I have to chalk it up as a little bit of a loss. And then having the games where Texas would be a really big favorite, Kansas, Kansas State, Texas Tech, having those be at home is going to make for a great donor day. Just a really good Saturday for everybody who's coming in. You're going to invite Greg Sankey to one of those games because, Texas will look really impressive and he'll have a good time. Corona will be sponsoring some free concert going on outside the stadium. But that means that when you're going on the road to games that are going to be a little bit more competitive, your Iowa State, your TCU, I think that those could end up being losses. So with 8 right there, I'm actually again, 8-4 sounds likely, but I will be on the under for Texas.
I'll take the over. You heard me saying, I was salivating at 7.5, saying, give me the over. I do think 8-4 is probably the most likely outcome, but I look at this team, so I'm torn on this one when you look at the way things unfolded last year, because they were in every game, lost in 4 overtimes to Oklahoma, lost to Iowa State. And I've referenced these here several times, lost to Iowa State in a game that they dominated except for the last 4 minutes of the game when they got out coached, and they lost to TCU by 2. But they also beat Oklahoma State in overtime. They also beat Texas Tech in overtime, teams that they played down to. And Sam Ehlinger was a big part of that. But now Sam Ehlinger's gone. I think Steve Sarkisian is a better coach than Tom Herman. And if I look at track record of coaches who have been able to come in with offensive minds, I think he's going to maximize what they get on the offensive side of the ball. I like the staff he's assembled. I like his new defensive coordinator. I'm buying the all gas, no breaks, and I'm buying this roster is pretty talented. I think he's inheriting a good situation. So give me the over.
So this is really not a play for me at 8. I'm going to go ahead and take the over. I think they have difference maker talents in Bijan Robinson. I'm confident that they can get above league average quarterback play with either Casey Thompson, who was really good in the bowl game, albeit against a kind of shorthanded Colorado team, or Hudson Card, who I know the Tom Herman staff was very high on. I have some questions about their pass rush. I think against the run, they should be pretty good. Obviously, it is important to be able to stop the pass in the Big 12. But look, you get Pete Kwiatkowski, who was at Washington. They did a tremendous job with a lot of those high flying offenses in the Pac-12. I think he should be a good DC hire for them. And for me, when I have a coin flip type situation, I'm just going to look at the odds here. I think this is pretty coin flippy at the number 8 and plus 110 to the over. I'd rather just go ahead and roll the dice with the plus money.
How many
Also,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry. If this Louisiana Lafayette number keeps dropping, I'm going to bet Texas. Like if this gets down to like a touchdown, give me the Longhorns. At 14, at 12, I could see taking Louisiana Lafayette for value. But this keeps dropping, man.
At you and your numbers. Yeah. You know what my eyes and my heart have told me? This Texas team has lost to Maryland twice in these kind of spots.
This is true.
They've got in their brain, they've got this experience. They don't pull back on the experience of like, what we do as Texas Longhorns in the first week of the season? We blow this team out. We show them that we're Texas. Like, no, we show up, we get hit in the mouth, we stumble a little bit, we like try to climb back into the game, and we end up tripping over ourselves late. I love this Texas team. I don't know why I'm the only hater out here, but I think that Louisiana game could be a loss, but I understand your value without a doubt.
How many games are going to win this fall?
Now moving on to the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Over under win total set at 7.5 minus 110 to either side. Or non-con Missouri State. Oh, that's Bobby Petrino, right? Still?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, heck yes. So we'll be on the over. Missouri State, Tulsa, and Boise State with that's a trip out to the Smurf turf the way that I'm looking at it right now. Not easy, but we'll see where Andy Avalos has the Broncos at that point. Once we get into the Big 12 play, they've got a 5 home game, 4 road game split. Kansas State, Baylor, Kansas, TCU, and Oklahoma are all going to be at home. On the road, we've got Texas, Iowa State, West Virginia, Texas Tech. You don't have Tylan Wallace. Obviously, we have some more turnover on the offensive side. Spencer Sanders is back. Defense, I think, was pretty good last year, and a lot of those players are back for the Cowboys. And I think that it's one of those weird twists where we always associate Mike Gundy with, him being an offensive mind and Oklahoma State having really productive offenses. But some of the reasons that Oklahoma State was successful last season, and maybe even a little bit near the end of 2019, was the defensive side of the ball. I'll go ahead and jump out the gate first with this one. I've got Oklahoma State as an over. I kind of look at the Mike Gundy history and think that Oklahoma State just gets out there, suits up, plays ball, and wins 6 games. So now I got to start finding those ones that are going to be the spots where they're going to be able to take this thing to 8-4. And again, I mentioned it earlier. I think that this is a group that is probably a little bit maybe better than TCU, as TCU is a little bit more unproven on the defensive side of the ball. But I've got Oklahoma State way ahead of West Virginia, Baylor, Texas Tech, Kansas State, and Kansas. So with those 5 games being wins for the Cowboys, I'm going to take the over.
I'm with you, although I'm not like highly confident. I do think that defensively, this is a Cowboys team that was very strong last year, like you said, and I think that helps give them somewhat of a floor for me being able to keep the bottom falling out. But I also do think this is a team that could be kind of a chaosy kind of team from one week to the next. I feel I do wonder if there's a chance for the things bottoming out. I just feel like, even though I do think the defense will kind of give them a decent floor, but like you look at that schedule, the non-con shouldn't be a problem, but Boise State on the road, that's tough. You get Texas and Iowa State both on the road in back-to-back weeks. You've got to play West Virginia on the road, which will be a tricky game. Like your most difficult games, the ones you're already going to have most trouble with, are kind of at home as it is, like that Oklahoma game. And how many times has Oklahoma State ever actually beat Oklahoma? We talk about that rivalry like it's a huge rivalry. At Oklahoma State
twice under Mike Gundy. The
Yes.
Mike Gundy record, I believe, is 2-13. Lincoln Riley, who just took over, has more Bedlam wins than Mike Gundy.
A lot can happen in Bedlam, right? Oklahoma can win small. Oklahoma can win medium. Oklahoma can win huge.
Yeah. So like the way I look at it is like Oklahoma 8-4 is more likely than 7-5, which is more likely than 6-6, but there's really not a huge gap between any of the three.
You're going over,
Yeah,
bud?
barely.
No. I'm just for record keeping.
Just
Tom
like,
Tom is going over.
I'm gonna go under. I think this and TCU are both fascinating programs because they've both had 3 years, and last year was actually pretty good. 8-3 was pretty solid for Oklahoma State last year. But it's kind of like you wonder, is this a little downturn and then it kind of gets back going towards closer to 10 wins, or is this like a trend? I think the same thing with TCU. TCU has been a little bit in a worse of a struggle, but is this just the downturn, or is this like the start of the end of two eras, which have been some of the better coaches in college football? Even bigger than that, though, I think the schedule is brutal. I think Boise State and again, if you're going to play Oklahoma, you'd probably rather play them on the road in a year like this. You have West Virginia on the road, you have Texas on the road, you have Iowa State on the road, and Boise State on the road. So there's 4 games where maybe if you're home, it's feel a little bit about it, but they're all on the road. Oklahoma's at home, but it doesn't matter where they play that game. I don't know. I feel more concerned about the schedule and the direction of the program. So I'm going to take the under.
I really want to go under here. Most shops out there right now are dealing 8, and at 8, I will bet the under because I get the push protection. Because we're using the Caesars lines, I'm going to have to go with the over because I feel like you're getting essentially a half win of value against the market consensus, which is 8, basically even money to both ways. In this example, we have 7.5 even money both ways. I'm going to show deference to the market and go ahead and believe that the market is more correct than I am on this. But I think at 8, I would play under. I don't like their road games, specifically having to go to Lubbock, having to go to Boise, having to go to West Virginia, having to go to Texas and Iowa State. I don't really like when a team gets Kansas at home because I feel like it's almost the opposite of the Clemson principle in the ACC. In the ACC, you'd rather get Clemson on the road unless you're actually a team that can win the conference. So you get one of your losses out of the way. Here, I think you'd rather play Kansas on the road because you want to have more favorable games at home, and they don't have those. They also get Oklahoma at home, which they could play them on the moon, and they don't beat them. So, God, I cannot believe I'm going to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and take the over just because I do feel like this is I don't want to call it a stale line, but the rest of the market's at 8.
No, but I mean, I want like 8-3. You even say it, you're like, damn, Oklahoma State was 8-3 last year. Almost don't even realize it. But
I don't trust Spencer Sanders. Yeah, I have questions about their receiving core. I do think their offensive line got better as the season wore on, which was important because early on, Tulsa kind of whipped them up front. I was like, ooh, this is a red flag, but I have to play over at 7.5.
Tulsa also had a good defensive front last year.
Tulsa lost some dudes, man. They lost both those corners. They lost David Collins. I mean, Tulsa was a weird G5 team, and like their defense was much better than their offense. And the dudes who were real difference makers at that level, a lot of them are gone.
Hey, you had that 1 year, Philip Montgomery. You were able to break through. Congratulations. Danny just mentioned TCU, one of the most interesting teams to look at in the Big 12 this year. We will get into them, plus West Virginia, Baylor, Kansas State, Texas Tech, and Kansas next. So we start here as we continue to roll along with our Big 12 win totals. The TCU Horned Frogs over under win total at Caesars set at 7.5, same number as Oklahoma State, -115 to the over, -105 to the under. Our non-con is rub your eyes. Like, is this a Friday night in college basketball, or is this a college football game? Duquesne in the house. Shout out. Duquesne, Cal, and SMU is our non-con draw for the Horned Frogs. Then they get Texas, West Virginia, Baylor, and Kansas at home, while 5 road games, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and Iowa State. This note from Ben Kercheval, pretty good. 23-22 in conference play over the last 5 seasons, with just one 8-win season in that stretch. Over under 7.5. Will it be another?
Give me the over here. I feel good about this one. I also think that you can find this at a couple places. You can take them plus 600 to make the Big 12 title game. If you like the over, you should probably like that. even better, in my opinion. Max Duggan was a 4-sport guy in high school. He was not one of these 7-on-7 dudes. So I've always thought he has real kind of like late college career blossoming potential. And because he was a baseball, track, football, and basketball or wrestling, one of the two. Iowa kid. Yeah. Like tough, really good athlete. I think TCU has a chance to be explosive on offense. I think they have a chance to clean up some of their kind of havoc allowed issues last year with all the TFLs and stuff they had. Remember, Duggan had that weird surgery right before the season, which put his season in question. Definitely not a normal offseason for them. They do lose some guys at safety, but overall, I think this defense should still be strong. I think that they belong in the conversation as the best, excuse me, not the best, the second best team in the Big 12. So I think TCU is going to have a nice year.
Over. I've got 5 conference wins pretty comfortably, and I do think that they go 3-0 in that non-con. But if they do slip up, I mean, I know Gary Patterson wants to beat Texas at home, given the way everything's happened in the offseason. Maybe Oklahoma State on the road is a spot where TCU can get it. But if 3-0 at the non-con, 5-4 or better in conference play, I'm right there with you. I think the high-end offensive talent, Quentin Johnston is another one who's just like a phenomenal big play, explosive threat. The defensive side of the ball is my only question, which is why I think that this season is huge for how you feel about Gary Patterson and where this TCU program is going, because it's a 500 program in Big 12 play. But if the defensive side of the ball takes a big step up, maybe we see another one of those years like 2017, where, as you're discussing, Bud, the Horned Frogs end up playing against Oklahoma for the Big 12 championship. So give me that over.
Daniel, where are you at?
I'm torn on this one. I'm almost talking myself into the over. Like, listen to these guys. I had under written down, but it was one of those ones in pencil where I'm kind of like, I'm curious to see what you guys say. I'm going to stick with the under. I think the first, Duquesne is obviously, it's got to be a win, but Cal, SMU, Texas, like that 3-game stretch is going to be vital to the importance of this team's year. How do they get off to a strong start? I don't think they're walkovers. I think they'll probably win them. But Texas is an interesting one. Then they go on the road to Texas Tech. I'm a little, Bud, are you worried at all about Sonny Cumbie leaving for Texas Tech, like new coordinator with another quarterback who you felt, and I know they brought Meacham from within, so it's not like it's a new system, but I do wonder, and I think that's been a problem for TCU, has been the turnover at quarterback. They've never had a great quarterback since, in 6 or 7 years during this downturn. They've had changeover at coordinators trying to figure it out. Like, here we are again. And I like Max Duggan a lot. And I think there's a chance he could burn me because I think he could be a breakout player. I got to see more. Like, I get the optimism around the program and I need to see more. So I'm going to take the under.
I think that's fair, Danny. And that's kind of why I like them to make the conference title game even more than I like the win total. Because if I'm right, I think I'm going to be really right.
Yeah.
I'm on the under with you, Danny. I think you're right. I'm actually pretty confident in it. Honestly, I understand what you and Chip are saying about this team. And I understand why you're high on them. It's just, I don't feel the same way. Like, you talk about explosive plays on offense. I don't see it. Like, if you look at this team last year in the passing game, I don't think they were that explosive. I think they were probably below average. And I like Max Duggan, but I don't know if he's an explosive quarterback. And I think that's going to limit them. And I think defensively, that team, it's still sound in what it does, but I also feel like talent-wise, they've lost quite a bit recently. Like, they haven't really been up to the level that they were a few years ago. But the schedule is not a bear, but I do think that non-con, I think Cal and SMU are going to be tricky games. I'm not just giving TCU the wins there because Cal's very tough defensively too. That's likely to be a low scoring, close game. SMU was a team that was very strong last year in the American, and it is a rivalry with TCU. So there's some of that to it. And then you get Texas right after that. So you've played like a lot of tough games in a row before then you go on the road for back-to-back games at Texas Tech, at Oklahoma. So I look at this team and I see 6-6 and 7-5 both being more likely than 8-4. So I'm on the under.
So
It sounds like a show bet.
When I talk about explosiveness, I'm mostly looking at the talent, where someone like Zach Evans didn't even start the season. You know, that's a 5-star running back, one of the top rated recruits in TCU history. I mean, he only had 3 games last season where he had double-digit carries. Like it was very much a work him in type process for them. And I think that, Quentin Johnston, that's another player who was a freshman last year. But Max Duggan had to shoulder a lot of it. I think that when I'm talking about explosiveness, I'm acknowledging that it wasn't there last year, but that the talent is there for it to be able to finally catch here in 2021.
It was there last year in the run game. It wasn't there in the pass game.
I disagree a little bit. I'm not going to say that they were explosive last year, but they were much more explosive than they were consistent in the pass game, I thought, right? So like Bill Connolly had them 30th in the country in passing explosiveness, but basically 105th in passing success rate, right? Which, kind of strikes me as, okay, they could hit the big plays. They were not consistent at all. And that pairs pretty well with 122nd in havoc rate allowed. Like a lot of confusion was going on offense, probably with Duggan being out for a lot of the offseason. And they were also bottom 5 in percentage of passes that came against man coverage. So I think people zoned the hell out of this team last year. And we're going to have to see if they can bust out of that. I think they can. I think they'll have better play from their outside receivers. Tom, we should probably show bet this.
How many show bets do we already have?
I mean, a couple, but we're gonna need a cover 3 historian, by the way, if you guys want to bring one on so we can track all this stuff for us.
That's a position that's open. We'll pay you in merch.
In cover 3 coin.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, crypto, our own crypto.
Yeah.
We need it.
There we go.
That's a good
Get
idea.
them out.
The West Virginia Mountaineers over under win total set at 6.5. It is -130 to the over, +110 to the under. The non-con has Maryland, Long Island, and Virginia Tech. The home draw is Texas Tech, TCU, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and Texas. Then on the road, you've got Oklahoma, Baylor, TCU, Kansas State, and Kansas. 6.5. What are we going to do with Neal Brown and the Mountaineers?
I'll keep it simple because I'm a believer. You asked about Neal Brown. He's a big reason why I'm taking the over. I think he's building something special there. I think there's a culture that believes in him. I think those first 3 games are really interesting, especially the Maryland one. Like you're going to have a really good sense of the direction of this program. And I'm concerned that Jarrett Deggy, gets benched at halftime in their bowl game. I'm a little bit concerned about his development. I think he's going to have to improve from what we've seen last year. But again, I'm a believer in Neal Brown and the culture he's building. And I think 6.5 is a pretty low bar to set. So I'm going to take the over.
I'm going over because they're literally playing the Long Island University Sharks. I'd never heard of Long Island University before. I looked at West Virginia's schedule and there it was. I'm going over. It's not super confident. I do think this is a team that can get to 7 wins in 2020. I don't think that this is a schedule with too much in the way. I mean, Maryland on the road won't be easy, but I think that's a game they can win. Long Island, they'll win. Virginia Tech at home, that's kind of a coin flippy kind of game. Oklahoma on the road, okay, screw it. But, they get Iowa State at home. They get Oklahoma State at home. They get Texas at home. They're going to pull off a win in at least one of those. They might get 2 of them. So I like 7-5. I like West Virginia over.
You don't have to go over. I think you should go over at this number. Again, this is an opportunity for you to bet at Caesars. Caesars, please sponsor us even more than you already do, because I'm telling people to go bet at Caesars right now. Again, the market consensus price for West Virginia is 7 minus $1.05 to the over. You're getting 6.5 minus $1.30 to the over. I guarantee you, if you run the math on this, a half win is worth a hell of a lot more than the 25 cents you're paying. You're probably getting a discount of about 25 cents, which is a really big deal when it comes to, American style odds. So for me, it's the over. Now for the actual football reasons. I'm a little bit concerned about this defense, right? They lost some true impact guys. I don't like all the dudes transferring out in the secondary. And especially I don't like it because, I mean, Jaleel is probably going to start at Georgia. Like for Georgia, one of the best damn teams in the country, a team that I bet for the national title, to be like, yeah, I want that dude on West Virginia's defense. The odds that West Virginia has somebody to step up for him is rather low. But I'm going to bet that the offensive improvement for the Mountaineers will somewhat outpace the defensive decline that I'm expecting. And so for that reason, in addition to the fact this is an incredible price from Caesars William Hill, take the over.
I did not take a single math class in college. AP stat score got me so that I could set foot in Chapel Hill and get out of there with a diploma in 4-ish plus some years and not have to take one single math class. So I don't even know about the math. I'm going to tell you, this is an under. This is under 6.5. And I don't want to turn this into something that we're going to get into in the Big Ten East, but I think Maryland is fascinating. That is one of those teams that I've flagged. I mentioned this on a previous podcast, pulling from lots of different power ratings, trying to compare them, trying to get some averages. People are all over the place on the Terps this year, and that is a tough game. You're right, Danny. Like Maryland and Virginia Tech in the non-con, those could be two losses for a team that I think is pretty good. The other piece of this is that I think it's unfortunate. In the Big 12, we're able to really get into the home and road splits because there's no conference imbalance. That's all we can find. Baylor, Kansas State, and Kansas are teams that I have rated below West Virginia, but all those are road games, And so I think that is a little bit of a unfortunate break where you're really asking them to be able to go and get some teams. You're really banking on that home environment to be something that can be a difference maker. So I don't think this is a bad team at all. I think the non-con has comparable opponents with losable games, and their most winnable games are on the road. So at 6.5, I'm going to go under.
Count them out.
The Baylor Bears over under win total set at 5.5, over at plus 105, under at minus 125. The non-con has Texas State, Texas Southern, and BYU. At home, you've got Iowa State, West Virginia, Texas, Oklahoma, and Texas Tech coming to Waco. We go Kansas, Oklahoma State, TCU, and Kansas State on the road. Jerry Bohan and Jacob Zeno, I don't know if anybody is going to saddle up to one of those as who you think will be the starting quarterback, or, what kind of difference it would be. To me, the biggest changes on the sidelines, or more specifically up in the press box, where now we've got Jeff Grimes coming in and taking over as the new offensive coordinator. So where are we going with year 2, Dave Aranda? The offense was bad, so got Larry Fedora out of there, went and made the Jeff Grimes hire. Defensively, I thought they played better near the end of the season, but you still got to be able to score to win games in the Big 12. What is the confidence in the Bears? What are we doing with 5.5?
I took the over. I've got him at 6-6, but there is very little confidence in that. Like they could be 5-7 just as easily as they could be 6-6. Hell, they could be 4-8 or 7-5. My concern here, though, is what you just mentioned. Like offensively, this was just it's not even that it was bad. It was extremely conservative. I think that Dave Aranda, with some like going for it and punting decisions, is extremely conservative. He's a defensive coordinator who, approaches his team from that kind of angle, which we've gone over many times. I think the Grimes hire could be good. I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of, leeway he gets with the offense and what they're looking to do and what they're able to do. But I just still don't think that he's going to come in and this Baylor offense is suddenly going to be explosive, because this was nothing close to an explosive offense last season. And I think that's going to limit them. And I just don't know if defensively they're as good as Dave Aranda wants them to be, or probably would need them to be to get to 7-8 wins. So I do think 6-6 is slightly more possible than 5-7, but I'm not playing it.
I would play it lightly to the over. I wouldn't hammer it, because you're getting plus money at plus 105. I echo all of Tom's points. I have major concerns about Dave Aranda as a head coach. If he continues to coach in year 2 like he did in year 1, I'm going to fade him until he's fired. I don't think their talent is all that good, to be honest. at Baylor. But I do like that one of their road games is Kansas. That's not a game that I believe they'll lose. I mean, they pounded Kansas last year and beat them by 34 points. Yeah, I do think this was a true new coach situation last year. They had a ton of COVID issues, not necessarily on their own team, but like all their opponents kept getting COVID and having games canceled. That was very weird. They have some decent returning experience, even though I don't love the talent. This is just kind of the other thing. I'll give Ken Barkley some credit on this. He's noted that teams that are lined at 5.5 go over in the last like 6 or 7 years at like a 75% clip. So you have to have like a real reason to go under, right? And I guess Dave Aranda could be that reason, but I'm not convinced he's a bad coach yet. I want to see a little bit more, so I'm going to go ahead and take the over.
I'm going to take the under. I don't love it. Similar to you guys. You guys mentioned Jeff Grimes coming in. When he turned around BYU, it wasn't a quick turnaround. It was gradual, right? And also, by the way, what did he have? Number 2 overall player in the NFL draft. I don't see a Zach Wilson type player on this Baylor team just yet. I'm a little more concerned. And part of this is personal too, because last year I was like, man, give Dave Aranda a chance. The win totals, I think it was like 3.5 last year. I was like, they could get the over, whatever it was. And it just kind of went sideways. It went the wrong direction. So I need to see a little bit more of a turnaround. So I'm a little bit, and in a conference, one of you guys mentioned this, you need to win with offense. I think the offense is going to take some time to get up to speed where they can, win some of these closer games with offense. So give me the under.
I'm on the over, and I'll just go ahead and pinpoint. So like I was on the under for West Virginia, and West Virginia is one of my pivot games here because the way I've identified it is I need for Baylor to get to 6, I need 2 of West Virginia, Kansas State, BYU. And I don't know whether to love Jeff Grimes going against his own team or to hate it. Right? Like, I don't know if there's any competitive advantage there. Maybe it's nothing. Like maybe it's a total wash with all the changeover of personnel. But in general, I'm going to think that they can get 2 of West Virginia, Kansas State, and BYU. Might be Kansas State, BYU and West Virginia, Kansas State. We'll see. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and buy on this one, and I'll be going over the 5.5.
How many games are going to win this fall?
Kansas State over under win total set at 5.5, -130 to the over, +110 to the under. Stanford, Southern Illinois, Nevada in the non-con. Your home draw is Oklahoma State, Iowa State, TCU, West Virginia, and Baylor. 4 road games in conference play: Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Kansas, and Texas. Like you look at this Kansas State team, and on the offensive side, like Skylar Thompson, Deuce Vaughn, love this squad. Defensively, I feel like we've got a lot of holes to replace. Wyatt Hubert, Drew Wiley, sacks, tackles for loss, real difference making on the defensive side gone. So, hopefully that program, which, obviously relies a lot on junior college transfers, development within the program, that they might be looking to have those replacements ready. So at 5.5, I'll go ahead and jump out with this one. I'm going under. I don't love it. They might need to be 5-4 in conference play instead of 4-5. Just depending on how you feel about the Stanford game, how you feel about the Nevada game. I think that those each could be losses, but I will say this for Kansas State fans. I love Kansas State as a chaos team for having Oklahoma, Iowa State, and TCU all coming to Manhattan. I think Kansas State could be more fun as someone to disrupt the Big 12 conference championship than a dark horse to get into the race. So don't love it, but I lean towards the under 5.5.
See, this is my favorite play in the Big 12 that we're doing today. I'm on the over.
Yep.
And I think this is going, I think they're going to clear it pretty easily. I think that what we have to realize, like Chip, you mentioned Skylar Thompson. Skylar Thompson's back. Skylar Thompson missed most of last season. Will Howard came in, took over for him, and no disrespect to the freshman Will Howard, but he wasn't Skylar Thompson. He barely completed over half his passes. He threw more interceptions than touchdowns. He averaged only 7 yards per attempt. Skylar Thompson is a super senior who is much better and has much more explosive qualities to his game. And then you pair him with Deuce Vaughn. I think that is going to bring a quality to the Kansas State offense that just wasn't there last year, and more consistency by far. So while I do have some concerns about them on the defensive side of the ball, I also think they're probably going to be solid because they have been solid defensively forever. So I think that they kind of have a decent idea of what they're doing there. So this team only needs to get to a bowl game for me to win this bet. Oh, I love it. Give me the over.
Same. I think this is a program, and it's not only Skylar Thompson. They had 5 other seniors come back to campus. Like, and it's what you would expect from a program like this, right? Not a ton of NFL talent, depth on the roster. So you have an opportunity to come back for one more swing at the fences, right? Let's come back and see if we can get the band together and do something special. They were 4-1 last year. I know they lost to Arkansas State, and that was ugly and that was embarrassing. But after that, they had knocked off Oklahoma. They were in position, and then it kind of all fell apart. And a large part was because Skylar Thompson got hurt. And I know he got hurt earlier than that, but once you're piecemealing things together and then it falls apart, you don't have a quarterback and you start rolling through some guys, then you're screwed, right? And that's what I felt happened last year with Kansas State. I think this is the type of program that really benefits from an extra year of COVID eligibility and a climate of, hey, chips on our shoulder. We got to go out there. We're going to surprise some people. And, oh, by the way, we were really good last year. And I think Skylar Thompson, with 30 starts under his belt, is the type of quarterback who can make a massive difference in putting this team over the total here.
I'm also taking the over here. I totally agree with the Skylar Thompson points. Will Howard was terrible. Well, I don't want to just bag on a college kid, but I mean, his adjusted net yards per attempt were under 5. Like he had a quarterback rating of 28 against man coverage and 33 against zone. So you could just play, grab bag as a defensive coordinator, and they couldn't do a damn thing. It
wasn't pretty.
No, like it really. This is similar in some ways, except more exaggerated to my NC State handicap, right? Where I think you have to factor in the likelihood that Devin Leary plays most of the games for NC State. I mean, Skylar Thompson's much better. I think this is a strong play as well. I agree with Tom. And this has been going up, by the way. Like you could get this at 115 about 2 weeks ago. Some places are already dealing like minus 150 to the over. This could hit 6. So if you want this, I would take this about as soon as you hear this episode.
Count them out.
I love being the Maverick against you guys in this one.
It's happening
Big
a lot
12.
in this show today. I think. I feel like it's me, Danny, and Bud on one side, and then Chip on the other side. Like, nah, screw you.
Well, I'm
idiots.
picking 9 overs.
Yeah, you do have some wild picks. I don't know. Something about the Big 12 that makes me happy, feeling like I've got all the odds against me. Just 2 guns back against the wall, ready to go out one way or another. All right, Texas Tech 4.5 over. Whew, this one. Speaking of movement, this one's at minus 145 to the over right now, plus 125 to the under. Non-con is Houston, Stephen F. Austin, and FIU. You got TCU, Kansas State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State at home, Texas, West Virginia, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Baylor on the road. Tyler Shuck comes in from Oregon. Matt Wells does not have a winning record against conference opponents. This is not a hot seat, but man, this does feel like a little bit of a pressure applied year where if Texas Tech fans are going to be looking at this football team and hoping to see some steps forward, 4.5, we're not even asking them to get to a bowl game. Which way are we going on this for the over or the under?
I'm not super confident in this, but I'm just barely edging them to the over. But again, it's not a very high level of confidence. I don't really know what to expect from this team just yet. I think that defensively there are still some issues. I think that offensively there are still some issues. And you look at that non-con, that Houston to open is going to be tough. I think that they could easily lose that game. Stephen F. Austin should be a win. FIU should be a win. But when you get into the conference play, Texas is on the road. West Virginia is on the road. Kansas is on the road. Oklahoma is on the road. Like, you're probably losing all those games. So, except for the Kansas. But you do have a somewhat manageable schedule at home with TCU, Kansas State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State. Those are games that I feel like you can compete in, and getting them at home is to your benefit because it does increase your chances to win them ever so slightly. So I don't think this is going to be a great season for Texas Tech, but if the total's at 4.5, I mean, they can get to 5 and 7. They might even get to a bowl game. So it's not a have to play it for me, but I'm leaning over.
Strong over here. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say ditto. I think the non-conference is huge. I think that You say the Houston game is tricky. I think that my brain wants to say, oh, Houston's got that, but really digging into the numbers and looking at how I feel about that game right now. I think that the Houston game, I call it like a winnable game. Like Texas Tech should be able to go and win that game. If they do, then you throw in Kansas to get to 4 and you just need one more. Maybe that Kansas State game at home is probably the one you would circle. TCU or Oklahoma State would be an upset. I think they can do it. So I'm on the over as well.
Do you realize I have a book here that I'm looking at that has it at 5.5 and it's juiced minus 130 to the over? Like that's one where you look at it and you're like, okay, what's going on here? I do think Matt Wells is in trouble. But I do think why? They haven't had a winning season since 2015. Like, it's not like the program's been great. It's been since the Mike Leach era where really it was relevant even. But I think the Tyler Shuck thing is really interesting because I cannot wait to see what he does. I think but why did he leave Oregon? Because Oregon's in a national title hunt. Like, was he going to lose his job? And clearly it looked to be that way. But I still think Tyler Shuck is going to be pretty good. I think he'll be an upgraded quarterback. Sonny Cumbie, by the way, who we mentioned leaving TCU, is now there. So they're sort of bringing back an air raid Mike Leach tie-in for some feel good around the boosters, I'm sure, and to keep some of the fans happy. But I think 4.5 wins is one of those ones you have to jump on if you can find it and take the over. So I'm going to do just that.
Over for sure. Basically as strong as my Kansas State play. Again, as Danny noted, I mean, this is a number that you should hit now because I don't think this is going to last that much longer.
How many games are going to win this fall?
Is the question for the Kansas Jayhawks. Will it be 1? Will it be 2?
And that's 0.
Or will it be 0? And that is the end of our conversation as it pertains to the win total. Non-con, South Dakota, Coastal Carolina, Duke. At home, they get Baylor, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, Kansas State, TCU, West Virginia. On the road, they get Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Texas, and TCU. Over-under win total of 1.5 plus 160 to the over, minus 190 to the under. Under.
I mean, like when you go through it, I feel like the good part of this is we should know by October, because unless Kansas wins 2 of its first 4 games against South Dakota, at Coastal, Baylor, and at Duke, and I'm looking at, I think South Dakota, I'll give them credit for that. You're going to start 1-0, we hope. But
that's a good program.
Yeah. Coastal beat you at home last year. Now you've got to go on the road and beat a Coastal team that has the same quarterback, that's got a lot of returning players. That's not a bad team. Duke on the road. I don't think any of us are super high on Duke, but it is a road game at Duke, and you've got a new coach who's coming in and is probably going to try to completely overhaul the program. So I don't know if it's there. And then when you get to the rest of conference play, it's like, what's the game on that conference schedule where you can willingly talk yourself into saying, oh yeah, Kansas can win that game? I don't see it.
I think they're 2 touchdown underdogs against every conference opponent on a neutral field.
It's like, yeah, like Texas Tech at home for homecoming is probably the most winnable game, but like, is that even winnable?
Not with how I feel about Texas Tech.
Give me the under. It's just begging you to take the over, to take that sucker bet, to say there are 2 wins on there. There's got to be. They have to be. I like Lance Leipold for the future, but not for this year. I think he's got to recruit. And think about the timing of all this too. Like, didn't even get a spring, didn't get any. Like, this is a program that is a complete mess. Long term, I think it'll stabilize somewhat, but it's going to take a long time. And I think this year is going to be that baseline, clear it out. Here's the low floor, weed out some of the players on the team that don't want to be there. Like, don't forget, there was just the report that came out not that long ago about the craziness that was unfolding. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Mm-hmm. I think it was on vacation when that came out. It's just a program that's a mess right now. So I'm going to take the under.
What do I have to pay to go under here? 180, 190, 200?
Yeah.
190. Yeah.
Jesus. Oh man. I could not
and you still can't talk yourself into the over though, can you?
I mean, yeah, but like, Oh boy. All right. To be clear, this is not something I want to bet at all. Like I would not lay basically minus 200 to go under in my personal bets. But I think you guys' points about, them, like, can they beat Duke?
I picked Duke in that game. Like I picked this as a Duke win when we
I
did
have
the
Duke
ACC
over.
Coastal win totals.
Yeah, and I went over on Duke. So I really don't give them much of a shot to beat Duke. Like I know FPI and SP Plus give them like a 33% chance to beat Duke, and I don't think that lines up with the reality of the situation. They do get Kansas State and Texas Tech and West Virginia at home. So like they get the right teams on the road, kind of. But screw it. I'll lay it. Give me the under. I really didn't think I was gonna do that, but whatever.
Hey, midnight.
All right, so I did
Madness
not
is in
take 9
October,
overs.
Jayhawk fans.
So yeah, we took 8 overs.
I took 8 overs, not 9.
Instead of 9. He is Bud Elliott. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow him at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Danny Cannell. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, 10 teams in 67 minutes. Thank you very much.